Hey everyone, Usman here, back with another video. So today I am going to be doing a fun little video. It's going to be about something that I feel like it's like a top 10 list again, sort of like another top 10 sort of list, as I usually do kind of on this channel. It's going to actually be about something different. It's going to be about top 10 Spider-Man villains, just like from the movies specifically. After I watched No Way Home, I really thought, since we saw these movies, saw these characters back, like these villains back from like the previous Spider-Man movies and everything like that, and I watched that movie multiple times. I was just thinking, what if I just made a video, about like the Spider-Man villains and like ranking them, specifically the villains in the movies, obviously, and ranking them and their sort of origins and everything like that. I'm not really going to be doing it based off like entirely like comic book origins. I'll try to like incorporate that and stuff like that, whatever, in the video, kind of. But for the most part, I'm mainly going to make a video specifically about the villains, anyways, like just from the movies, obviously from the Spider-Man movies. So that's what I plan on doing. So I'm going to do that right now in this video. And before we do any of that, don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as just leave a comment as well, just letting me know who your favorite Spider-Man villains are. Have you seen all the Spider-Man movies? Just give me like a list of them in general in the comments or something. Just anything like that if you want to down below. Love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to start with number 10. Yeah, I picked up as many Spider-Man villains as I can recall from those movies, so I hope I didn't miss any. If I did, you can let me know. Starting at number 10 is Green Goblin from Amazing Spider-Man 2. Harry Osborn, essentially, I think the actor who played him is Dane DeHaan. He played him in Amazing Spider-Man 2. He was actually like my least favorite, of course. Like, there are times where it was sort of interesting with the way that they played it, I guess, with him wanting to get, Peter Parker, or Spider-Man's blood, essentially, to cure him of this weird disease that he had, that I think him and his father sort of, like, his father had but passed down to him. So it was kind of interesting in that regard, but, I don't know, but like it wasn't like, but towards the end of the movie they introduced him as the Green Goblin, and then at the same time I just thought that, oh well, the Green Goblin has been done better before by another actor, which I will name probably sometime down this list, I guess. But yeah, like I don't know, like the actor tried his best, he did something different with Harry, I guess. They brought back Harry and stuff, but it didn't really speak great volumes to me in terms of his performance. But I don't know, I guess he tried to make it his own, the actor, and not be like a complete copy of, Willem Dafoe or whatever. So, but yeah, he introduced him too late in the movie. Yeah, and his goblin suit was kind of weird too, a little bit, even just like the way he looked. But, instead of looking like a real, goblin or having the suit, but whatever. But either way, it was fine. Some parts here and there, like the obviously the ending part, it just made him even more crazy and sinister. But otherwise, he wasn't like my favorite villain. But he's still on the list, so coming in at number 9 is Shocker. Shocker is a villain that has been around for a while as well in the comics. He's a villain that pretty much is just like a regular, like he's like a C or D-ish rate Spider-Man villain. He's not really that crazy, intimidating, or evil or anything like that. Like Spider-Man, he's just like a crook, and Spider-Man just catches him whenever he's like robbing banks and everything. In the video games and in the comics and the cartoons, everything I've seen him in, every iteration, that's kind of what Herman Schultz or the Shocker is like anyways. So he's not really intimidating. But he was fun to beat in those boss battles for, those Spider-Man games. In Spider-Man Homecoming, I think, was it Bokeem Woodbine or something, was the actor who played him. He played the Shocker, he was Herman Schultz. There was 2 iterations. One was like another guy, and then the other guy was, and then Herman Schultz was the other guy. So the other guy first, he was kind of like, he was like evil. I mean, he was just like, started stuff with Spider-Man, and then after that words, the other guy, Herman Schultz, the real Shocker, like started stuff with Spider-Man. And really it wasn't like shockwaves where it was like, psh, like that kind of thing. It was more of just like, he just punches Spider-Man like this, psh, and then all of a sudden like he just goes back. So it was kind of interesting in that regard. But yes, Shocker, lowest on the list as well. I mean, I kind of like what they did with him in Spider-Man Homecoming, but he was lowest on the list because I'm like, they didn't really do that much with him in that movie anyways. So, but Shocker's really not that big of a threat anyways. He was just working with Vulture. So, but whatever, he wasn't bad. I didn't think he was that bad. Okay, coming in at number 8 is the Lizard. The Lizard is like an interesting villain. I always kind of thought he was sort of interesting in Amazing Spider-Man 1. Like, not someone who is like completely memorable. Him turning everybody into giant lizards is kind of a corny sort of plot line, I guess. But, they wanted to make it seem like very comic booky, I guess, in that regard, and whatever else. But you know what, I think, was it Rhys Ifans or something, he tried, or whatever, he tried his best in that role. It was a bunch of CGI Lizard. Would have preferred him in the lab coat. I think they had him in the lab coat one time. But yeah, I don't know, Lizard has just been, but yeah, it was kind of corny though with that plot line. Not the best, but whatever, he tried his best. That's all I can really say about the Lizard. CGI was fine with him. But I don't know, it's good that we saw Tobey fight him in Spider-Man No Way Home, spoilers. But Lizard was fine. Coming in at number 7 is the New Goblin. The New Goblin I am talking about is Harry Osborn, James Franco, like his version of the Green Goblin. There was something with him where he thought that Spider-Man killed his dad Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe's character. It really was not the case. It was really more of like, okay, well, Spider-Man is, the glider mainly just flew towards him, and then he was like, oh no, or oh. Like that whole thing. I don't know, it wasn't something that I was like that crazy, but I kind of like the new Goblin. I like that how his new Goblin helped Spider-Man at the end. He was sort of redeemable. The fight scene that they had was pretty cool. Some of the fight scenes they had were cool. I understood why he kind of went after Spider-Man. So like, even though Spider-Man 3 was kind of like not the best, but I still liked it. Like I said, for that, those were one of the moments in the film where I liked. Number 6 is Venom. Venom, I always thought he was a cool character. In the movies, he's played by Topher Grace. I'm trying to debate like whether I like him more, Topher Grace's version of Venom, more than Tom Hardy's. I think I might actually now, not by like a giant margin, but by a little bit, because with the Tom Hardy's Venom was just so like weird, very goofy, all that weird stuff, that I'm like, you know what, Topher Grace's was a little bit more closer to the comics. Sure, people wanted him to be a bigger guy because Eddie Brock is bigger in the comics, but I'm like, who cares? He's a fictional character. They could do whatever they want with him. It was just like, the whole thing where he's a terrible journalist and he's like, I want to go after Spider-Man because he destroyed my career or something, that whole thing, or humiliated him in some way. The more I think about it, and I even sort of rewatch the film again, I don't think it's that bad. I think I might like him a little bit more, and a little bit more closer to the comics. Fight Spider-Man. I think at the time I probably thought Venom was scary. He's not really scary anymore to me, but his suit looked cool. I guess wasn't CG, probably. I liked his Venom, but they introduced him so late at the end of the movie that it was like, really? Even though it would have been better if they had him in the beginning a little bit, but it's fine, I guess. Number 5 is Sandman. Sandman, I don't think he's a menacing villain compared to the other Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie villains. I just don't think he's that menacing. I think that Thomas Hayden Church, who plays the character, he actually did his best, I guess, at points in the film. He wants to support his daughter, everything, because I think she has an illness, kind of like Scott Lang. Well, in the comics, I think with Scott Lang, but more in the MCU, it's more with Scott Lang in regards to his daughter and paying for child support. So it's a little bit more of a financial thing. With Sandman, I don't think Sandman was that awful. It's just that, he was a villain. I guess, you could care about him a little bit more compared to like, and everything. But like I said, his personality wasn't menacing or anything compared to the likes of like some other villains I'll be naming down the list. But, he tried his best. I like the comic accuracy, I guess, with the shirt, even though you probably buy that shirt like anywhere. But still, the fight scenes with him were pretty cool, turning him into a big sand monster. That kind of stuff was pretty cool. He was a pretty big threat to Spider-Man, except for the black suited Spider-Man, but like when he was in his regular costume and, when he was not infected by an alien, it was pretty crazy just with him fighting him. That was insane. Sandman wasn't bad. Not my favorite villain and not as menacing really, but you know what? He had some moments. And even the scene in Spider-Man 3 where he's birthing, and even his theme, I grew to love it and enjoy it even more. Even with all the CGI incorporated into that scene, it was still cool. Number 4 is Vulture. Vulture has always been like an interesting character. People just always made fun of him because he's just like an older gentleman and, in a bird suit. But, in Spider-Man Homecoming, they made him menacing. He was the main villain of that movie. It was interesting, and you got to understand like his motivations in that regard. And, Spider-Man just kept on getting in the way, but he was just like, you're doing wrong things and everything. And then Spider-Man was trying to stop him. Tony Stark was kind of part of that whole thing. But you know what? Again, people always complain about how Tony Stark is always kind of like the main complaint in the MCU films about like, oh, why is he always part of that? He's not even Spider-Man's main villain. I mean, I get that, but I don't know. Again, never really bothered me. I mentioned that before in other videos about that. I would say that, again, it was just fine. And, Vulture was pretty crazy in that film. Michael Keaton did a great job playing him. His suit was cool, and it didn't make him look like what he was like originally in the comic books. So I like that more. That's what made him even more, just to make him even more techie look. Better than the comics, that's what I would say. Number 3 is Mysterio. So Mysterio, I always thought he was also very cool, too. I liked his, like, the aesthetic of the character in the video game Spider-Man 2, the video game, based off the movie. Thought he was really cool in that game. In the cartoons, comics, like even just every time he was there, he was like the master of illusion. He didn't have any superpowers of any kind. He just had like his special effects, sort of knowledge and using that against Spider-Man. That was always something that I always really thought was cool about the character. Always sort of like a big threat to Spider-Man in that regard, even for a dude who doesn't have superpowers, against a guy who does have superpowers. So that's what I kind of really liked about it. And, he was just kind of smart in that regard. Jake Gyllenhaal plays that role in the movie, and I really like the use of the drones and everything, because drones are so prominent nowadays. The mocap suit was cool in Spider-Man Far From Home. I thought that just his performance in that film overall was great. I know a lot of people thought probably that one scene there was like where he was explaining his evil plan was a little like hokey or a little weird or something, or I don't know, but I kind of liked it because it was just like, it brought it back to like traditional comic book villain where he was like, he's the villain, and he's overdoing it with that thing, but I kind of liked it that way. It just kind of brought me back to the old school vibes where he's like, and everyone will know I am Mysterio, like it brought it back to that sort of time, if you know what I mean. So that's kind of what I would say about that. Mysterio's always been cool. The suit looks great. People always complain about comic book accuracy and all this kind of stuff and whatever with suits, and people say the MCU doesn't do that. I'm like, and I totally disagree, because I'm like, what do you mean? They do that with everything. Sure, they make some little changes here and there, but because some of the comic book costumes look really ridiculous because they're in the comic books. You put it into live action, translate it into live action, it'll look weird. Like, people will make fun of it easily. So that's kind of what So, but yeah, Mysterio, I always thought he was cool. Quentin Beck. So it's always cool to see that. And yeah, his performance, he was one of the best parts of Far From Home, and I like that film quite a bit. Not my favorite Spider-Man movie, but I still liked it, and I think he was the best part about that. Number 2 is Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. He was very menacing, just crazy. Willem Dafoe was crazy. Well, he's not crazy, but when he plays that, he plays incredibly well. I think that's one of his best roles ever, and I've seen other movies with him kind of in other roles, and he's great in those films too, but I think with Green Goblin, he played it wonderfully. Yeah, he's just evil, scary, scared me when I was younger when I saw that film, the first one. Scary, even scarier in Spider-Man No Way Home, but not like, oh, I'm scared. Like, it was just just the way that plays him masterfully or wonderfully. You remember the theme. His costume is pretty much memorable, even though it's not exactly like the comics, but I still liked it either way. People thought he looked like a Power Ranger. I still thought it was fine. Ruthless. After Spider-Man scared Aunt May, killed Aunt May in No Way Home. So he's just always ruining Peter's life. Even in the comics, he's always doing it. So even just the way that they did it in the movies was just insane. And just that iconic laugh. Sorry you got to... Yeah, that was a terrible... Yeah, but either way, it was perfect. He was very, very menacing in that movie. And even when he plays him again, he's menacing. But now that I'm done talking about that, I'm going to start with number 1, and my favorite Spider-Man movie villain is going to be... Let's do a drum roll. And the number 1 is... Dr. Octopus, or a.k.a. Doc Ock, Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina. Yeah, when I played... I saw Spider-Man 2, I think that's one of the best comic book films ever, Spider-Man movies, I think, ever. Him, like the Green Goblin, he is menacing as well, but I think with Doc Ock and Green Goblin, the things that make him... Obviously, the performances that they give as those characters are memorable and menacing, but I think the one thing that I think stands out to me is really just because, the way that... The reason they act that way is because there's always, a mental sort of thing with them. Like, with Green Goblin, it was more of, he had another personality, so which Norman Osborn was a regular guy, but then they had, the Green Goblin come in and be like, Norman? And then with Doc Ock, he had the tentacles that sort of manipulated him, sort of schizophrenia a little bit, hearing the voices in his head, trying to make him go crazy, changing his personality, making him go and be menacing, even for a guy who has 4 tentacles and is not a giant sand monster, or a guy with superhuman strength that flies around on a glider. He was still menacing even with that. Spider-Man 2, that scene obviously where he kills all those surgeons that are trying to get those tentacles off. Super crazy. Scared me again when I was younger. It doesn't scare me now, obviously, but it's again, perfect casting with him. He was great in Spider-Man No Way Home, still carrying on with that performance. Again, it was just perfect. He was perfect in Spider-Man 2, and he was perfect in Spider-Man No Way Home. In terms of ranking his performance compared to those, I don't know. I can't compare it. They're both great. Same with the other villains, I guess. That's my ranking for the Spider-Man villains. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.